Good morning. And I think this is my 15th Rosenthal-apalooza, so I'm very proud to be one of the probably top 10 in terms of attendees of this conference over 20 years. And it's very hard to say no to, as you all know. So I'm here at an interesting time. We are in the midst of, this is Spirited Media was. This is what Spirited Media is today, which is instead of owning 3 sites, we now own 1 site, and this is what it'll be in about 72 hours. Owning 0 local news sites. So we sold, so with that context, I think one of the reasons I thought at the timing was interesting and why I wasn't sure I wanted to do it was what's my opinion on where we are in local as a guy who is now trying to get out of the daily local publishing business. And my answer is, damn right we can still make this work. I will tell you, and I'll explain a little bit about why we're selling and what the reasons were and some of the mistakes that led to the fact that we were in that position. So a little bit of context. I should tell you, by the way, that we sold them to really good local brands. So it showed that we did a lot right. We built value in these 3 sites that we created, and we were able to turn them over to very happy, great stewards. I know. I keep turning around looking up here when I can look there. But so anyway, this is where we sold Denver to Colorado Public Radio. We sold The Incline to Whereby Us, a startup that you guys probably all know that has sites in many cities, Miami, Seattle, Portland. And we're going to sell Billy Penn, but I can't say to who yet. So why am I still bullish on this after all this? Why is the guy getting out? I'll tell you why. Part of the reason we got out was we weren't able to raise the money we needed to raise to get us to where we needed to be from a profitability standpoint. This round fell a little short. The funding environment out there is pretty tough if you're a for-profit, which we were, by the way, in case you didn't know that. So you're out there trying to raise money in a for-profit environment from companies that are going through their own struggles at the moment. And we just weren't able to get the capital we needed. But part of the reason that we were in that position is we made some mistakes. And one of them was we launched membership at least a year too late, maybe a year and a half too late. Membership is a huge boon for us. It brought our burn down 75% last year, but we still needed a little bit more time, which we didn't have the funding to get to, hence us moving to selling. But we saw enough in what we learned over the last 5 years doing this that I want to share some of those things. So yes, I'm a believer. I'm still sure that we can make this work, but I want to start, before I get to how I think we do it, have to start with a couple of caveats, I think. Caveat 1, the days of 100-person local newsrooms are largely over. It doesn't mean that there aren't places where somebody is going to be able to, a local funder a local billionaire will decide they want to have a really robust local newsroom. But I think for the most part, the big large newsrooms are pretty much over. That doesn't mean in a lot of these cities you can't have 10 10-person newsrooms or 5 20-person newsrooms or 50 2-person newsrooms. I think as we niche off a little bit, there might be sites that cover sports, some that cover entertainment, some that cover government, some that cover something else. And then those break into niches, which in some ways are more fungible from a financial standpoint because you have very specific people who might buy advertising or be willing to give you money. But the big newsroom, I think we have to acknowledge, is largely over. The days of competition driving action need to end. One of my big takeaways from this, and this was something we did from day one, and I think we were absolutely right about, is we almost were never the 10th person standing at a press conference or the 5th person standing at a press conference or the 3rd person standing at a press conference. We have such a dearth of local coverage around the U.S. right now that the idea that we want to have 7 news organizations in the same town, each sending multiple people to cover the same press conference, to me is insane. Because somewhere in there are 15 stories that are not being told by anybody. And so what we need to do is start working together. And in Philadelphia, Billy Penn, one of our 3 sites, was one of the 19 sites that was involved in this project called Broken Philly, where we just covered poverty in Philadelphia, and all 19 sites were worked together. We actually had meetings with 19 news organizations where almost no profanity was thrown at anybody else. Imagine how hard this is. We generally have not worked together very well, but we have to work together now because we have to look at coverage of an area as something we're trying to cover collectively, not just by ourselves, because we're not going to have enough people to do that. But all that said, the road ahead is still very treacherous. We don't know what's going to happen with the economy. We don't know what's going to happen with funding, whether that's nonprofit funding, whether it's foundation funding or for-profit publishing, funding. So the road's treacherous. We don't have room for a lot of mistakes. I think we have to be very, very, to my point about not launching membership early enough. That alone may have been the mistake that put us in the position where selling was our best option. And so we've got to be very precise about the decisions we make and commit to them and then commit to unmaking them if they're the bad decisions. And I think we still move too slowly as an industry to do that. And then the last one is the newsroom cultural changes. After 25 years of working in digital news, I'm still frustrated by how often you run into people in the newsroom who don't want to change their habits and don't want to change their schedule and don't want to change the way they do things. And that obviously, if that continues on, I think the first three things on the slide are sort of moot. I think we'll be in it'll be fatal for us if we don't embrace this a little bit more. Now, obviously, we were doing digital-only startups, and we didn't have to worry so much about some of the kind of older legacy challenges that other people in the room have, but still, the cultural changes have to happen. But it can be done. So with all those caveats aside, here's sort of my 10 bullet points, which I'll give you a little bit of context in each of them. So for me, don't be in the community, be of it. I think one of the real struggles we've had for a long time is we write like we don't live in the places we're writing about. How often do you read a story in a newspaper and feel like the person who wrote it could have written it from anywhere on earth, right? If you live in Austin, you should write like you know Austin and you have a familiarity with it. And I think we don't do that yet. We do it. We did it at the sites we're in. And I think there's a lot of startups that have embraced the idea that we have to be of this community, not just in it. But I still think in the legacy side of things, there's still a little bit of a sense of we want to be kind of on the side reporting, but not really involved in it. And I think that's a fatal mistake for some of the reasons I'm going to get into shortly here. 2, focus on the consumer always and in all ways. And that doesn't mean, it means a lot of things, right? It means some of the obvious stuff. Use Harken to gather questions that you can answer, you have your newsroom answer. There's lots of tools you can use, commenting tools, to get people involved in what it is that you do, but it's not just that. It's also understanding that you actually have to deliver to where they are, which is delivering to mobile devices. We don't even think, when we think about serving the consumer, we sometimes think about providing information that's useful to them. Is this working? Am I getting it to this? All right. Keep changing. All right. Perfect. So, but it's also user experience, right? We still treat the user like we want you. Now it's falling apart. All right. Is it? I've been in tech. Somehow the mic is still a mystery to me. So it's about serving consumers where they are. It's about serving them fairly by providing user experiences that are not abusive, which they are borderline abusive in a lot of cases. Because, again, we're going to need these consumers to basically fund us down the road. And so stop worrying about how much you can monetize a single visit and start figuring out how you can get people to just have lots of visits and monetize them a little bit less on every visit. Build a long-term relationship with them. And so it's focusing them in all ways. It's not just involving them in the process. 3, have a point of view and communicate it. And this one is always controversial because people think that means a political point of view. It does not mean a political point of view necessarily, although it can. What it means is you just have a point of view for what your site is about. So for Billy Penn in Philly, it was really Philadelphia is a wild, crazy, flawed, wonderful city, and we all want it to be better. How do we go about doing that? We don't go into it with the idea that everybody's going to agree on exactly what that is, but we all agree that that's the goal. The goal is a better city, and we all acknowledge the weirdness of this place at times. And I think you have to be clear about what you're about. It can't just be you come here to find out what happened yesterday. In my opinion, it's got to be more than that. It's got to be much more connected as a sense of place. 4, value. I think you got to produce journalism of value, not of quantity. I think we got into this volume game, which was, and I don't know that, we all probably got into it to some extent. I never was in it as much as I think others had to be in it, which is you have to produce a lot of stuff. If I make more journalism every day, the math works better. I think we've proven at this point, based on what's happening with economics of journalism, that's not the answer. Writing 3 really well-reported stories a day about the community is going to get you more audience and more loyalty down the road than rewriting 20 pieces other people in town wrote on a given day. You've got to have your own voice. You've got to be able to find the white space in the coverage in your area, and you've got to do those stories. But this is not a quantity game, local journalism. Maybe it's at a national level where you're trying to generate enough ad revenue. That's the way to go. But it's not at a local level. You've got to have a sense of place. Metrics. Don't do impressions or page views. I know that that's a hard argument to make for people who are fully based in the ad model, and maybe you can't get out of that particular cycle of hell. But if you cannot do page views as your core metric, that is a wonderful way to go through life, I will tell you, because we never made page views the core metric because we were always based in making money on events and making money on membership. So for us, it was the loyalty of the reader that led to revenue, not the quantity of the page views. And to me, a page view spike is like an ice cream sundae. It's the kind of thing that you should be able to see and go like, that's a treat. But if your entire diet is page view spikes, It's a really crappy diet. And as we all know from the chasing page views, it's a very unreliable diet. And so if you can focus on getting important stories in front of the right people and having them share it, that will lead to page views, but don't focus on page views as a primary thing. 6, be different. We're in a city that has, keep Austin weird. Don't just be informative. Be surprising. Be essential. Be fun. We stink at fun. In general, in journalism, we stink at fun. It's like sometimes just have fun. Like every year in Pittsburgh on Valentine's Day, we did Pittsburgh-themed Valentine's Day cards. One of them was just, "You are my sunshine because there is none," right? So, but this gives you a sense of place, like the city you're in, and you can be fun, and yes, you can also do good journalism, but you can also show that you're a human being who has lots of facets, and you can be fun. So, 7, don't cover national. You cannot win that. Own your own backyard. If you're a local startup and you ever have national stuff on your site, I would love to know why you think that's a good thing to do. Yes, if Donald Trump comes to your town and you want to report about a national figure coming to town, that's fine. But writing about national and international news on the site, if you can avoid it, I think is a bad way to go. If you came to any of our sites, you got all local news all the time, period. Remain small, but try to act big. One of the compliments we got a lot for Billy Penn was when we would tell people it was a newsroom of 4, they'd say, "You only have 4 people? It feels like you have 15, right? That's what I want. Because there's a lot of newsrooms I've been involved in where we had 15 and it felt like 4, right? So use strong curation. Link people to stuff that's interesting in your community, whether you wrote it or not. And just link to it. Don't rewrite it. Be indispensable. Have a good morning newsletter. Have a strong social game. 9, build loyalty and passion and monetize that. If you do the first 8 in this, you start to have an audience that feels connected to what you do and wants to help you survive, right? And you have to be clear with them that you need them to help you survive. So focus on loyalty and passion as a business model if you can do that, because down the road it's a lot more sustainable than an unpredictable ad model. And then 10, which circles back to number 1, don't just be of the people, be with the people. We threw about 75 events last year across our 3 sites. We mingle with thousands of people a year that read our sites, and that also makes them feel more connected. So one of the keys, so really focus on being with them and not reporting from the side. And that's it for me.